working? Yeah? Great. So this feels a little bit like a silent disco if you have participated in one. So.
Testing.
Okay, shall we try this one? Okay. Everybody's hearing? Oh, lovely, lovely. Our silent disco is on, so enjoy the show. So welcome everyone. I'm Yoko Alender from Estonia, the climate minister, and we are really happy to have a distinguished row of panelists here today. You can read we have people from all over Europe, and we are going to be delving into climate laws and reality. Does the law change reality? How to do it in the best way? Will it actually save the earth? And we are really happy to be welcomed by the Portuguese here, and it's my pleasure to give the welcoming words to Emílio Sousa, the Secretary of State for Environment from Portugal. So please welcome up on the stage.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, welcome to our stand. It is a privilege to be here today to discuss a matter crucial to our future, the role of legislation in climate action. As we confront one of the greatest challenges of our time, it's clear that ambitious and binding climate laws are essential to turning our commitments into concrete, enforceable actions and securing a just and resilient future. By embedding climate targets into legislation, we create a structured and accountable pathway forward. These laws also ensure continuity across electoral cycles, maintaining steady progress on climate action regardless of political change. They guide public and private sectors alike, aligning strategy and investments with national and international goals. The European Climate Law stands as a landmark achievement in global climate governance. By setting legally binding targets of net zero emissions by 2050 and an interim reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030. It showcased the EU's commitment to leading by example. Portugal has embraced this vision by enacting its national climate law, which reflects the Paris Agreement and the European framework. This law not only recognizes the climate emergency, but also strengthens governance in climate policy. It has introduced new rights and responsibilities, enhanced citizen participation, and established the Climate Action Council to provide strategic advice. Key measures in the law include limiting the sale of new fossil fuel-powered vehicles by 2035 and banning the use of fossil-based natural gas for electricity generation by 2040. These initiatives build on a legacy of action that dates back to Portugal's National Climate Change Programme in 2004. Our efforts are supported by two crucial policy instruments, the Roadmap for Carbon Neutrality 2050 and the National Energy and Climate Plan 2030. These have driven tangible progress, enabling Portugal to surpass its greenhouse gas reduction targets for 2020 and significantly contribute to the EU's collective goals. Portugal's achievements are notable. In 2021, we became the fourth European country to phase out coal-fired electricity generation. By 2024, 80% of our electricity already comes from renewable sources, and we are on track to surpass 90% by 2030. Moreover, by 2022, we had reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 35.5% compared to 2005 levels. These milestones underscore the power of legislation to drive meaningful climate action. Legal frameworks provide clear objectives, accountability mechanisms, and structured pathways for both mitigation and adaptation. Without these binding measures, ambitious goals risk remaining mere aspirations. Portugal's climate leadership extends beyond energy. This year, at the Environment Council in Luxembourg, we backed the EU Nature Restoration Law, a milestone which contributes to restore 20% of degraded ecosystems by 2030 and all necessary ecosystems by 2050. To meet these targets, Portugal is finalizing its national restoration plan, which harmonizes EU goals with local priorities. We have already made strides by naturalizing 550 kilometers of rivers, promoting biodiversity and supporting local communities. Additionally, we are expanding marine conservation with 3 new protected areas, including the Algarve Reef, Pedra do Valado, and zones in Sintra, Cascais, Mafra, and the Azores. In conclusion, climate legislation and action are not just about preserving the environment. They are about shaping a sustainable, prosperous, and inclusive future. Portugal is committed to this vision, ensuring that no community or sector is left behind in our transition to a greener world. Because, as you can see all around you, it's worth it. Thank you, and I wish you all a productive discussion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, dear Secretary of State. And now let's move on to our discussion. And on this side event, we want to delve into very practical implementation of climate legislation across these very different countries. And our discussion will focus on how climate laws are being enacted on the ground, showcasing successful achievements while also confronting the technical and financial challenges that have emerged. And ultimately our goal is to foster a rich exchange of ideas and experiences, learning from each other's progress and obstacles in building a more sustainable future. So let's move to the questions. And the first question that I would put is, and I would start here on my right with our dear colleague Olga Yuhimchuk, the Deputy Minister from Ukraine, where the situation is, of course, immensely difficult, and we are all with you. You have all our support until the victory. But let's go to the matter in hand. How is Ukraine doing with climate law in perspective? How is the debate, and how important do you see it even at such a very difficult time in your country?
Yes, hello. It will be difficult both with the headphones and the microphone. Thank you very much for the inviting to the panel. I believe we do have some experience to share here with other countries. Indeed, the situation in the country is difficult, but it doesn't mean that we stop there. We want to continue. We want to use all the opportunities we have in order to ensure that the country continues its prosperity. And we do have some good experience before. what I used to work with, and something that is very close to my heart, is the MRV system. And why I want to talk about that and share this experience is that it's good that when we all talk about targets, about goals that we all want to achieve, it is extremely difficult to set those goals without having a reliable data. So before you set any goals on the political level, it is always important to understand where you stand, what you have, what level of emissions you have. And the MRV system is a very, very practical approach to any development of legislation in terms of targets or carbon markets or whatever it is. And this is something that we did. We established an MRV system and we put forward an MRV law, which supported us with obtaining very reliable and verified data on the GHG emissions. And from now we see it is a very big basis that we use for our further legislation, such as newly adopted climate law, where we established and confirmed our carbon neutrality goals by 2050. So basically, one of the key messages from my side would be start with the MRV, as it is the basis for any climate legislation and setting the goals. Keep tracking where you are. In the process of preparation, a very, I would say, practical maybe advice to use is ensure very good intergovernmental, interagency, better say so, coordination among the ministries that are involved. It's the Ministries of Finance, Economic, and others that are in the topic. So basically, I believe that is in very brief.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Olga, for your remarks. And let's move on to another country who has chosen the European path, and we congratulate you very much on this, dear colleague from Moldova. Maybe Miss Marina Lungu, the DG of Climate Change Policy from the Ministry of Environment. How do you see climate policy for the new path that Moldova has decided to proceed on? And how big a role do you see in the climate legislation on this path?
Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for having me on this panel discussion. It is very important to address the thematic question on legal framework. Our national law on climate change of the Republic of Moldova, it was launched, approved this year on April, and we are proud of this. This law, which is like an umbrella for climate change management. The law is a legislative framework that was enacted to address climate change and guide the country's efforts in mitigating its impacts and adapting to its effects. This law actually is part of Moldova's broader efforts to comply with international climate agreements such as Paris Agreement and to align with EU environmental standards given Moldova's European aspirations. Our national law on climate change provides ensuring the development and implementation of policy and planning documents for the achievement of national objectives and targets established in accordance with the Paris Agreement, as well as energy and climate established under the energy community, because the Republic of Moldova is part of energy community. Another objective is to ensure the planning of the allocation of the necessary financial means in order to achieve progress on development with a reduced level of GHG emissions and increasing climate resilience. Also, another goal is to ensure complete, coherent transparent, accurate, and comparable monitoring of GEG emissions, as well as integrated reporting on the progress made in the development and implementation of climate change mitigation and adaptation policies. Of course, and another main goal is to ensure public access to information regarding planning in the field of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and adapting to the climate change. Certainly, implementing climate legislation poses numerous challenges, such as balancing economic growth with environmental goals, addressing political opposition, also ensuring public support and securing international cooperation. What was new that our laws introduced is a National Commission on Climate Change. This commission is under the government level, and it has a very important role in the climate change issue. Another very important aspect that is provided by the law is a financial mechanism for setting the price for CO2 emissions. At the moment, we are in a process of working out the carbon tax mechanisms. Our studies have been done for this purpose, and probably in a short time, the final decision will be made whether we will implement a regional ETS system or another one.
Thank you very much. And
Thank
now
you.
let's move to Netherlands, a very traditionally climate aware country where this process has, of course, already been going on for a long time. So, dear Sophie Hermans, the Minister for Climate Policy and Green Growth in the Netherlands, a fellow Liberal. So great to welcome you here. If you would also look back at your process and see what specific parts of your climate laws have been the ones that the people have really taken to, and what you see, what kind of action has led to this success with the people.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for being here as well. We have a climate law in action for a few years now, and in the law we stated that we want to be climate neutral in 2050, and we have a target for 2030. And by setting these targets in the law, you see that in public, in politics, but in society, everybody now says, okay, we have those targets, so there's no discussion about the targets and if we're going to reach for those targets, but they are there. And now the question is, how are we going to get there? And therefore we have three elements in the law that help us by guiding us the way and defining how to do it. And that's that every 2 years there's a progressive report published with numbers of how we are performing in general and in different sectors. Every 5 years we have to make a plan, a policy plan that looks further than 1 year, but for 5 years, 5 to 10 years ahead. And every year the cabinet has to write a policy brief to Parliament, to society, but how we are performing and what, how we take responsibility for where we are. And those documents and also the law, it helps us to guide the discussion and to guide decision making. But we still have to be careful that not this law or the products that we have to deliver according to the law, that these are a goal in itself, because the goal in itself is that we want to be climate neutral. We want to deliver this clean country to next generations. But this whole framework helps us to get in contact and to start the conversation and the public debate. And we do that in different forums. And we started off with what we called climate tables, with a lot of people from society, NGOs, companies, well, everybody who was involved in climate policies. and they came up with the first policy ideas just after we published the law. Last week, we launched a new project. It's a civic council with 175, I think, Dutch people from 16 till, well, no maximum age. People from all across the country, and they can. We start to debate with them what is needed now in order to reach the 2030 goal, and of course further on. And what we see is that we have to think about, involve people, involve stakeholders in this phase of the transition, because after 5 years that we have this climate law, and we are now seeing 2030, well, it's not in 10 years, no, it's in 5 years from now. So we see all the easy measures have been taken, and it's getting harder and more difficult, and it will, everybody will feel what we are doing. So therefore, this involvement, these discussions, the civic council is very important. And the law is the base, the foundation on which we work. But there's no discussion about this law anymore. It's now about how we are going to reach it and how we make sure that everybody can contribute and do what is needed.
Absolutely, thank you. We'll get to the problems or challenges with implementing in the next round as well. So good to have an introduction to that. Let's move on to Lithuania. Simona Skentvilas, the Minister of the Environment. You have had now both the experience of the Parliament and also 4 years in Cabinet. How have you seen the process of climate law in Lithuania and its reception by the constituents?
It was both difficult and easy because we are not an oil and gas producing country, so there's only jobs to gain from the energy transition, not like many other countries around the world. So in national economy we looked at the climate plan also as an economic development plan, because we are sending around 7 billion euros yearly to the foreign countries, which at some stages we would not like to send the money, like Russia before. So there was both climate plan looked also as an energy independence plan, geopolitical plan, and economic development plan. But the biggest challenges were, of course, with agriculture, because agriculture is very conservative, and we had protests all over Europe, Netherlands as well, and so the most difficult part was there. And we see that actually the agriculture will remain the single biggest emitting sector in 10 years, because all other sectors are either it's well regulated, or there's enough finances, there's capacity to change. So there's increasing difficulty to pursue this plan there. The second bigger challenge was transport sector, because it's private, it's decentralized, and a lot skepticism. And but to focus on the good things, I think Lithuania has made a lot of effort to bring renewables into, especially heating sector. We are around 90% renewables in the heating sector. Electricity production has doubled in recent 4 years, and we are aiming to have 100% renewable own demand produced locally in Lithuania by 2030. So I think in several cases the regulation has fostered a lot of change. And I would say, as a politician, you have to aim, 3 strategies are workable. One is regulation, where the second is just forbidding certain industries or certain fuels, like coal in heating, and then there's a monetary policy. So we have seen that in agriculture, the monetary policy is the farmers follow the money. So we saw that this is the most efficient. In certain sectors, regulation has leveled the playing field. Then there's forbidding in certain sectors is also a good policy, because you have alternatives which are emissions-free, pollution free, and then you just forbid things because there's better options. So I think as a politicians you have to choose always between the monetary regulation and just forbidding, and not everything fits, and of course persuading the regional citizens, not the urban citizens, is the most difficult part to pursue the climate policy and climate plan.
Thank you. Very. I feel you. Also, I wanted to tell the audience with Lithuania and our other Baltic colleagues and Poland, we have worked for 10 years, and now in a couple of months we will also be decoupling from the Russian and Belarusian grid system and be joined with the European one. So an important step towards the energy independence in Europe. But from here, let's move to the OECD. We have with us Mathilde Mesnard, the Deputy Director for the Environment Directorate and Coordinator for Climate and Green Finance. So I'm hoping from you to get a little bit of the umbrella view, like where you see the best practices and what actually works also with the people.
Thank you. And indeed, there are a lot of diversity in climate laws because the contexts are different. You know, the economic structures are different, the institutional environment are different. But we have seen that in our membership, there are a couple of features that work well and that usually successful. So I will mention 5 of them. The first one is, of course, like to have targets. You have qualitative targets, but most importantly quantitative targets. Usually you have your long-term targets, but what's good is to break down this long-term target into shorter-term targets. And we have a couple of interesting examples here, where with the UK, for example, that break down the long-term target and have set 5-year carbon budgets. You have something similar in Germany, where they have assigned annual sector-specific carbon budgets also. So this is really critical because this is the pillar of action, having short-term targets. And interestingly, then the second point is to have review mechanisms for these targets. And here again, the UK has established a mechanism to do target correction based on scientific input. And even more interesting is to prevent regression. And I think in the current political context, that's a good idea. You know, and so some countries have inserted in their climate laws some no backsliding clauses. That's the case for Germany and Spain also. That means that you're allowed to update your targets to increase it, but you're not allowed to decrease it. So I think that's something countries should reflect on these days. In Chile also, for example, they have a principle of non-regression. So I think this point is very interesting. The third point, and it relates to what you said, the Minister from the Netherlands, you need to have monitoring and reporting systems. And it's done differently in different countries. You have some where these are the ministries in charge that do the monitoring. In many countries it's the case. In Chile, for example, they have adopted a whole-of-government approach and set up a specific Council of Ministers for Sustainability and Climate Change. And this is that is chaired by the Ministry of Environment, but this is the Council of Ministers that reports and monitors the progress on the targets. But some countries, such as France, the Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken, you will correct me otherwise, and Spain, they have entrusted also external scientific advisory bodies to do this reporting and monitoring, to make sure it's done independently. So that's a good idea also. And of course, whatever the monitoring process, most of the climate laws, they organize the reporting to the parliament, so that you have more transparency and also engagement with the general public. So this is a very important point. The fourth point is to have, independent advisory bodies that can, play a role in offering advice to the government. And this is the case in many countries. I will mention UK again, Denmark and France, they have this type of advisory body, and they play the role of being the watchdogs, ensuring like scientific integrity for the climate policy. So that's a very important point. And the fifth point that is also has been described in many of the countries here at the table is to make sure that you have public participation and stakeholder engagement. And here I can mention again Chile, who had a very interesting process in the development of their climate law. They have done extensive, consultation with the public, the general public, in developing their climate law, so that after the adoption of the law was somehow more easy at the parliament level. So this is absolutely critical. And I think also if we want to reflect today with somehow the regression of public support in many countries for climate policies, this is critical. And I think that's where there is room for improvement in many of our membership countries, like making sure that the general public is involved in the development of the law, is involved in the monitoring of the law, is involved on the reporting to parliament, etc.
Thank you for that, and it's good here to continue to our second round, which will be the final round. We don't want to take up more of your time than we have promised. If we look at the interest of the public, the science says that they are very concerned about actually leaving a better planet for the next generation and not borrowing from our children like we have done. So that is the long-term view. How to, if you think about both your steps on the implementation of the legislation, but also when maybe making new legislation, how much you take into account and how can you take into account the interest of the next generation to also have resources, because I think we have come to a point where we understand that resources are actually finite. So this brings a lot of tension. And also we have this kind of responsibility. So maybe if you want to elaborate who wants to begin, maybe I give this kind of option to choose. Yes. Sophie, yes, please.
Yeah, I think that this is the whole reason why we're doing this. So I'm not, for me the motivation is not a percentage in law, but it is why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I want to deliver a planet or a country that is still clean and nice to live in for next generations. I do this because I want to become, as a country, but also as Europe, of course, less independent of countries you don't want to be, you don't want to depend on. So this is why we are doing it, and this is what we are constantly taking into account when we are thinking about new policies and new measures. And of course, you also have to think about, okay, we are taking these measures right now. We have to finance it right now, and how do we make sure that not all the costs are being paid right now? Because we are doing this for a longer time for future generations as well. And that's, one of the biggest challenges we are facing right now, because this whole transition, it costs a lot of money. That's not a surprise, and that's also I can defend it, but at the same time we have to pay, and we have to pay things now, and we have to make sure that we spread the cost fairly and evenly nowadays, but also now and with the future generations. So yeah, but the future generation, that's why I'm doing this.
Absolutely, and this shows that you are in line with the general public, I think so. Good, you're probably a good politician. But if you want to continue from here, also maybe for some of the other panelists, Simone, as you were mentioning, also the economic development as an important factor, because actually it will cost us more to not do what we are doing, and our only way forward for growth and clean growth is this. So maybe if you want to elaborate on this.
Yeah, I've been an active politician for 10 years on a parliament and ministerial level back at home. So if I could compare 10 years ago, there would be very few companies interested in climate policy back at home in Lithuania. But now we have on opposite, the lobby groups consisted of renewables, clean tech industry and so on, who are lobbying the parliament members to do more. Because there's jobs to gain, there's a market to open, and there's to press out the imports. So I feel that there is a section of economy and society which is actually asking for more, to do more. But the job for politicians is to show the way for those who have most difficulty to change, the socially
Vulnerable.
the regional society, those who are running the cheapest possible cars and driving, and those who don't have access to public transport and so on and so on. So the biggest task for environmental politicians is to sell the climate policy to such vulnerable groups, and as said by the Dutch example, to put the cost up front, so finance the transition for the social vulnerables, because generally in society and the national economists in all countries in Europe probably say that climate policy is a good policy for the economies. But the biggest task is how to show the way for the whole society. And there's few politicians that are successful nowadays. Most of us are on defense in any country, and I mean we have to share the good practices. But I think for example, in Lithuania, we have done a lot with demand side through public procurement. We have said that the bigger government invests half of material investment, so we set the standards. So the companies align, or the agriculture sector, they follow the money. So instead of planting something which is bad for environment, we are planting currently something which is nitrogen capturing and sequestrating plants and so on. So I think regulation should be tough, but the communication is always the big challenges. Also in the European Parliament elections recently, and in any other country. So we as climate ministers, we have to be very good in communicating the change for the social vulnerable and putting the upfront cost for the society, especially there.
Absolutely, I agree, and also maybe it puts a lot of pressure on us to actually be very realistic and also be very honest, maybe even radically honest sometimes. If you want to go further to Moldova, maybe how you see the next generation and the Moldova people, do they see the green transition as a possibility, or a kind of something you have to do because you want to take the European path, or you see it as actually a possibility for a green growth?
Of course, it's a very, let's say, difficult way, because now we are trying to, as you have mentioned, we choose European way, and now we are as a country candidate to the EU, and of course now it is very important to, as I have mentioned, it is for our law on climate change, we intend to introduce an ETS system, and how was mentioned, colleague from Ukraine, we're also trying to set this before ETS, to set this MRV system. And of course, to put on the paper is one, but to implement this in the practice is another thing. And we're trying to set also all these mechanisms to be workable, to have the possibility of the businesses to monitor their emission, and to also to report, to have a very reliable good data. And after this, of course, they will be interested to improve their technologies to decrease emissions. Of course, it's a very long way, but I hope to get in a right way.
Thank you very much. Also to Olga, over to you if you want to maybe elaborate this. I think also the war has made us all very much more aware of the values of freedom, of the values of independence from countries we don't want to depend on. And but at the same time, with climate change, of course, urgency is becoming more and more, but still many people see it as a long-term challenge, not as an urgent challenge, whereas safety is always very urgent challenge. So how do you see that in Ukraine? Do you manage to keep both of these ends in a way?
Yeah, well, thank you for a very difficult question. um, if I may reflect on something that was already said before, I mean, there must be a very, very strong motivation in the country to move forward. Of course, in the circumstances that we have, it is double, triple difficult. But well, there are different ways of motivation. For me personally, I have a very situation. Well, I've become a mom just recently, and it was my baby's first year yesterday. And it is extremely important for me that my baby lives in a safe world, and that this world is not only safe and secure, but it is also green. She, as the next generation, will live in a very, very green world. I'm very sorry. And it is very important that such partners you have there in place. And this motivation really helps me to drive the process in the ministry, and this really motivates my colleagues to work also. And I'm not the only one like that, because we understand that our country continues to live, it continues to bring new life, it has more other goals, and we understand that there are those very, very emergency issues. And there's no way you can balance emergency and long-term planning. You always have to face the very, very urgent matters, such as social and economic issues. And you will never find a perfect way how to balance it, never. But what is important is, even though you address the emergency matters, you don't forget about planning, because at some point it will end. At some point you will have to recover the country, and you have to understand on how you want to do it. So it is important to start from very now, or even from yesterday or from years before, the proper planning and proper discussion and coordination with the ministries, with business, with NGOs, with everyone you have in the country. It is important to have joint vision on how you move on.
Thank you,
Thank you very much,
Thank
and
you very
apologies
much.
for
No
being very
worries, and
personal.
thank you for the lesson to all of us in resilience. It's admirable. And if we could continue and maybe end with the remarks from our OECD colleague, and also maybe to elaborate on how we change the narrative. I think we have come a great way. It's just a matter if we have done it quickly enough to actually talk about the urgency, but also talk about the economic possibilities. And always people ask us when we do legislation, what's it going to cost? Rarely people ask, what's it going to cost to not do it? So maybe if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, and maybe I will link also with what Olga was just saying. I think one of the emergencies today is to avoid political backlash. So, and to do so, we need to really focus more than what we have done so far on environmental justice, ensuring equity, making sure that all the stakeholders, the relevant stakeholders, have really a say in the decision-making process, and that, of course, primarily the most vulnerable, that would be the most impacted and won't have the means, to face the challenges. And there are some very interesting examples again. For example, Costa Rica, they have set specific consultation with the indigenous communities. Or in Chile, they had a workshop with children to discuss with them their future. So this is, I think, becoming somehow an emergency. I'm sorry, it's not an emergency of the kind that you're living in Ukraine, but it's that's really something we need to do. And at the OECD, to really reinforce this narrative that working on climate will help, strengthening growth, will help in creating jobs. We are currently developing some modeling and a kind of to strengthen this narrative, because this is crucial in this year of new NDCs, to make sure that countries are convinced that it's by being ambitious on their NDCs that they might be ambitious about their future in terms of growth, in terms of social equity, in terms of job creation, etc. So it's a bit pause for publicity. We'll have a new modeling exercise on that, and we hope to deliver beginning of next year on this, to try to help, countries to be ambitious on their NDCs and avoiding backsliding on the targets.
Thank you. That I think will be very helpful. And I want to just conclude with a few remarks on our development in Estonia. And I definitely think also in our case, if we started maybe the discussions before elections, proposing that we would need a climate law, and now comparing where we have come to when we are actually giving next week this law into government and then parliament, the making of the law has really furthered the debate. We are not debating anymore about is climate change there, but we are actually talking about which steps is the best to take to combat this, to adapt, to mitigate. So I think the legislation and the process of actually also making the law is very important in furthering the debate, and then giving also security to people in this kind of times where security is very scarce, and giving people this kind of hope that we can actually deliver, we can take responsibility also for keeping a planet for our children. And I want to thank you all for being a huge part of these debates in all your countries, and for coming here and sharing your thoughts with us. And let's do it. We can do it. Thank you. Oh, I have some Estonian chocolate for you, of course.